Let's talk about something we all do every day: eat. For decades, we've had official dietary guidelines to help us make good choices. But what happens when that advice gets turned completely on its head, sparking a massive controversy? We're going to dig into the firestorm around America's new diet and ask a really important question. Is this about our health or something else entirely?
So the government didn't just quietly release some new pamphlet. No, the U.S. Health and Agriculture Secretaries came out and called this, and I'm quoting here, the most significant course correction in federal nutrition policy in our nation's history. I mean, wow, that's a huge statement, basically telling everyone to stop and listen up.
But the moment these new rules dropped, the debate just exploded. So the real question is, are we looking at a genuine breakthrough for America's health, or is this actually a complete breakdown of the scientific process we're supposed to trust? Let's get into it.
To really understand what's going on here, you first have to see how the sausage gets made. So let's take a look at how these guidelines are normally created, and then we'll see how this time things were very, very different.
And the difference is, well, it's night and day. The traditional way involves a big 20-member panel of unpaid volunteer experts. They spend 2 years in a totally transparent process reviewing all the latest science. The new way, a tiny 9-member paid panel. The process was completely opaque, with zero public participation, and maybe most shocking, they just tossed out the official scientific report that was supposed to be the foundation for all of this. It's a huge departure.
So, why the sudden, drastic change? Why throw out the old playbook? Well, as they say, you gotta follow the money. And that trail takes us to a closer look at the new panel, which was handpicked by Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
And just before the new guidelines came out, the New York Times dropped an absolute bombshell of a story. The headline said it all: several of Kennedy's dietary advisors have ties to meat and dairy interests. You can imagine that immediately set off all kinds of alarm bells about conflicts of interest.
And here's the heart of the issue. Secretary Kennedy had promised publicly that his panel would have no conflicts of interest. But it turned out that 3 out of the 9 members, that's a full third of this powerful group, had reported financial ties to, you guessed it, the meat and dairy industries.
And if there was any doubt about that influence, listen to this. The director for the Iowa Beef Industry Council, Kylie Peterson, was celebrating that research funded by her industry was used for these new guidelines. Her exact words were, "These research projects turn the food guide pyramid upside down, putting steak at the top." I mean, you can't get a more directed mission than that.
So, with a process like that, what kind of advice did we end up with? Well, it was confusing, it sparked a massive scientific debate, and it left a lot of top nutrition experts just shaking their heads.
Take what some are calling the saturated fat paradox. On one hand, the guidelines say what they've said for years: limit your saturated fat to 10% of your daily calories. Okay, but then, in the same document, they encourage you to eat full-fat dairy and even list butter as a healthy cooking oil. For pretty much anyone, if you follow that advice, it's almost impossible to stay under that 10% limit. It just doesn't add up.
And the medical experts were quick to call this out. Dr. Donald Lloyd-Jones, a really prominent researcher from Boston University, didn't mince words. He said that butter is, quote, not a healthy source of fat, not by a long shot. A clear, direct contradiction of the government's brand new advice.
Right. And Dr. Cheryl Anderson over at UC San Diego pointed out something that feels pretty obvious. She said, "We do not have a problem of underconsumption of animal products in our country." This really questions the whole foundation of putting more emphasis on things like steak and butter in the first place.
Okay, quick science lesson. I promise it's painless. Our bodies need things called essential fatty acids to work properly. The key word here is essential. We can't make them ourselves, so we have to get them from food. And the main sources for these are common seed oils, things like sunflower, safflower, and soybean oil.
So, with that in mind, here's another head-scratcher from the new guidelines. They tell people to choose oils because of their essential fatty acids, and they specifically recommend olive oil. But they leave out all of those seed oils, which, as we just saw, are the best sources of these fats.
Dr. Christopher Gardner, a professor at Stanford and a member of that original scientific committee that got pushed aside, points out the obvious scientific error. He says olive oil does not contain high levels of essential fatty acids. Seed oils do. So why on earth would they exclude them? Well, many experts believe it comes directly from Secretary Kennedy's own well-known public opposition to seed oils. It looks like a classic case of personal belief trumping scientific evidence.
So, after all these contradictions and questions about money and influence, it all boils down to one simple question, right?
Who do you trust? And this has some really big implications for all of us.
You know, it wasn't just a few lone voices. Major organizations like the American Society for Nutrition basically laid out all the problems. They flagged the complete lack of transparency, the way complex science was oversimplified, all the contradictory information, and warned that this could seriously erode public trust and just create a ton of confusion.
So, we've seen how a process that was supposed to be all about scientific consensus got flipped on its head, seemingly by a small group with industry connections, and it resulted in advice that's confusing at best. So it leaves all of us with a really personal question. When the so-called official advice is this messy and this debated, how do you decide what to make for dinner?